They told the crew never to open container 47. And by the third night at sea, something inside, it started knocking back at them. So I am hungry, so you guys are going to have to sit with me while I tell this story. This story was sent to me by a guy named Eric, and he claimed that in his early 20s, he briefly worked for a private security company that was an international cargo company that transported high-value artifacts for wealthy collectors, museums, and organizations that were connected to places such as the Smithsonian. Now, according to Eric, most shipments were exactly what you would expect. Ancient statues and paintings and, all historical relics and rare fossils and everything that is heavily insured and heavily guarded. But there was one shipment, he said, that the crew treated completely differently from the moment that it came on board. It arrived at the dock just before sunset inside of a massive black steel container. And there were no markings on it except for a faded symbol that Eric didn't recognize at all, and it barely scratched the surface of the lock. Now, there was no barcode, there was no destination label, there was absolutely nothing. And that immediately made him begin to ask questions and feel uneasy because it was something that he's never seen before. Because every other crate on that ship was cataloged down to the ounce, except this one. Now, Eric said that 6 men in dark suits supervised the loading personally and refused to let dock workers anywhere near it. And one of them even threatened to fire a crew member for taking a picture of it. And, when the container was finally secured deep below the deck, the captain reportedly gathered the crew and gave a strange warning, right? And it was, under no circumstances was anyone allowed near container 47. No inspections, no questions, no exceptions, nothing. Eric laughed it off at first, and because he assumed that it was some priceless artifact or illegal private collection being moved quietly across the Atlantic, he figured, what the hell. But the first night at sea, things started getting really, really strange. Oh, and in case you're wondering real quick, best kielbasa ever. One of the crew members claimed he heard movement below the deck long after everyone had turned in. Now, it wasn't a shifting of the cargo, it wasn't footsteps of the crew, but it was footsteps, and they were slow and heavy, and it was pacing back and forth. Now, Eric said the man was visibly shaken because whatever he heard didn't sound human. He described it as uneven, like something was almost learning how to re-walk again, is what he said, right? But nobody believed him until the second night, and that's when this hideous smell started to accrue on board. Now, Eric described it as a rotting earth mixed with stagnant water, like something trapped underground for centuries, and it had suddenly been exposed to the air. Now, the odor spread throughout the lower levels of the ship, so, it was so bad that crew members started avoiding that area entirely. Like, they would vomit even going near it. And then came the knocking, and it was 3 loud bangs from somewhere beneath the cargo deck, and the entire ship heard it, every single member on board. And one sailor joked that maybe somebody got trapped inside the one of the containers in there, but Eric said nobody left after the 4th knock came back, because it sounded deliberate, like a response, like somebody or something was trying to get their reaction. Now, that same night, Eric was assigned to help check a refrigeration failure near the lower storage corridor. And he didn't want to go, but being the newest guy, he was kind of voluntold, right? He didn't really have much of a choice. So as he got closer to the container 47, he noticed something strange immediately. And the metal surface was wet, and not from, any of the seawater, but condensation. Like the inside was far colder than the surrounding air. And Eric said it was pretty cool. And, scratched across the steel near the latch were long marks that definitely had not been there before. At least he didn't remember. Now, from the inside, Eric said that's when he thought what he heard was breathing. And it was very, very slow. And it was wet, and it was directly behind the container wall on the inside. And then a voice was heard, and it was very quiet, and he said it was speaking a language that he never heard, didn't recognize, but the voice was very deep. And he said he froze immediately on the spot because whatever was inside sounded old. Not like, no geriatric or like AARP member. I'm talking ancient. Like the voice itself had been dragged across centuries. And then it started speaking in English. He said it was broken English, and if you had to guess, it was a very deep accent from like the Eastern Bloc is what he assumed. And all it said was open. And Eric said that he backed away immediately and radioed the bridge. But before he could finish speaking, every light in the corridor went out. Complete darkness for almost 10 seconds. The only thing he could hear was breathing coming from inside this container. Now, then came the sound that haunted him the most, he said. And something inside shifted weight, and the entire steel container creaked inward, like whatever was in there was now standing up. The emergency lights finally kicked back on, and Eric said that he saw one of the locks bending outwards, not like breaking or broken, whatever. It was bending as if pressure from the inside was slowly forcing it apart. And then he ran back to the upper deck. Now, the next morning, the captain announced that they would be docking early due to a mechanical issue, but Eric said he knew that was a lie, because when the ship reached port, armed vehicles were already waiting at the docks for them. Men in unmarked uniforms immediately boarded and forced the entire crew to remain in their quarters while Container 47 was removed. Nobody ever explained what was inside, but before Eric left the company weeks later, one older crew member pulled him aside and told him something absolutely disturbing that he was expecting but not expecting at the same time. And he claimed that the artifact inside the container had been recovered from beneath the ruins discovered in an Eastern Europe sealed somewhere behind this stone, older than recorded history. Like it was like a stone block. And according to the excavation team, the container hadn't been built to transport whatever this was. It had been built to keep whatever was in there kept inside. So I don't know. What do you think? What do you think was inside Container 47? Was it a creature? Was it something ancient? Or was it something that humanity was never supposed to uncover? But I don't know. This sounds like a real life, the Demeter story. So I don't know. Let me know what you think. But however, I highly recommend that you try out this bread. It is absolutely delicious. And again, this is probably one of the best kielbasa's you could ever possibly buy. So let me know what you guys think in the comments.